Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk Midlife Crisis with your hosts,
Ashley
and Tracy. And today we're talking about healing ancestral trauma.
It only took us a few times to get that intro in, by the way. So this topic I really kind of was back and forth about just because it really requires us to be a little vulnerable. And I decided that I felt like it was really important to talk about this because I know for me, I didn't expect a lot of the stuff to come up at this point in my life that has, and I've had, some really big revelations, and I just didn't really think that people experience this, and I'm hearing more and more that they are.
Right.
And we've talked a little bit about midlife and how you really reflect a lot more about, your childhood and how you grew up and decisions you made in your early adulthood and where you're going,
And not to mention your hormones and your emotions all bring all of this
Absolutely.
on.
Yeah. So as you know, last year was a really tough year for my partner and I. Her mom passed away at the age of 62 unexpectedly.
Right. So young.
And that, obviously had its own challenges. And shortly after, I would say a month after, I lost a cousin who was in his late 30s unexpectedly by his own hand. And dealing with both of those was just too much.
Yeah.
Then I went through some things with one of my kids, very serious. We had to put him in rehab, and it was just a lot. And I don't think processing it because I was already kind of going through my own, midlife, experiences.
Right.
And then all of this trauma
all
at once within, a 2 to 3 month period. And I just thought, my partner actually said, I think I might go to therapy. And it had never crossed my mind, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to go too. Because I just felt like I was in a rut and I was just sad and hopeless and nothing was exciting anymore. And I just felt like in a really weird place. So I did start therapy. I've been going now for not quite 6 months. And I went in there thinking I'm going to talk about all these things that I've experienced and how I can work through this and get through it.
Right.
And then I found myself talking about my childhood. And I actually started, I've mentioned it before, some EMDR treatments, which is mainly for PTSD.
Right.
A lot of, war vets have gone through it and it's been really helpful for them, but it helps with any kind of trauma that you've experienced.
And I also think it's important to know that PTSD isn't just a veteran's.
No. It's any trauma.
Something that veterans deal with. I think there's a great deal of the general population that deal with it as well, but perhaps haven't yet diagnosed it as such.
Right.
Like they don't understand what's happening to them. But
Yeah, so I, just to give you a little bit of background, I grew up in a very violent home, a lot of verbal and physical abuse, and lost my father at 15. He died by his own hand. And several years later, fast forward to early 2000s, my 24-year-old brother, who really struggled with mental health and drug addiction, died by his own hand. And my uncle, before that, in between those, which was my brother's dad, died by his own hand. So mental health is very prevalent in my family, obviously. And it obviously, going through that was a lot. Here, fast forward, decades later, here I am. And kind of reliving my brother's death when my cousin passed. He was from the same side of family that my dad and uncle are from. In fact, it's my uncle's son. The uncle that passed away was his son. So, two fathers and sons.
Patterns. Yeah, there's some patterns
absolutely.
there.
And that in itself, obviously it's a lot to go through and try to process and understand. But that in itself, the fact that that many people in my family, my own family, have done that was it. When my cousin passed away, it all just came back, and even heavier.
Right.
And so that's kind of why we went this direction to my childhood in therapy, and how I was coping with, living in the environment that I was in, and then the trauma that I experienced even after that.
Right. And continued to experience.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so I was finding myself with this recent trauma, handling it or managing it the same way I did as a child, which was to just make sure everyone was okay. Everyone's happy, let's keep everything peaceful, take care of everyone, clean the house, a lot of cleaning. I mean, at a very young age, I was cleaning my house because it was a distraction.
Right.
It kept me busy.
Right.
And so I found myself doing that with this most recent trauma. And it's really avoidance is what it is, you know?
Yeah.
And so that kind of came up in therapy. Like, okay, so the things that you did to cope before aren't working for you anymore. So you need to learn new ways to cope. And it was just, like I said, it was kind of a revelation for me. I never would have even thought about that had I not gone to therapy. And so I'm learning new ways to cope with that. And I always felt like I've kind of been a survivor, and that I've really turned my life around. I raised my kids a very different way than I was raised,
right,
which was my goal, all along. I feel like I was very successful in doing that. I'm probably not, I don't share a lot of emotion or physical affection, probably because of the way I grew up. So I'm really trying to get in touch with that and share more and be more open and honest with my kids about, I think for a long time I wanted to protect them from knowing about my past.
Yeah.
And, they're all adults now. They're in their 20s and they need to know, I'm your mom, but I'm going through some tough times right now.
Right.
And I need support and understanding. And, I'm here for you when you need me, but you also need to know that I'm human. And so I've been very real and raw with them. And I think they've really appreciated that and seen a whole new side of me. And I feel like it's really strengthened our bond.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just am so in awe of you for having gone through so much in your lifetime, and you have 3 amazing, beautiful children.
Thank you.
And I can only imagine how opening up and sharing that with them brings them in a little bit closer. I as well don't share, with my
kind
children.
Of the same
right?
way.
Yeah. But that's amazing. And just the fact that you are able to survive all that you have went through with such, grace and, dignity and warmth. And I see that in you. So it's funny how you say that, you might not have, been that way with your family, but I definitely see.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You showing that towards your children. And I am 100% certain that they know how much you love them.
Thank you.
And now, and it's different with children too, because I think there's an age, going from teenager to adulthood, but somewhere past that transition, I think is where it's more relatable for children to their parents. At some points, not so much, but, when they're younger and even, just becoming an adult, but now that they're, becoming more mature adults.
Absolutely. Yeah. I, in going to therapy and, talking through all of this, I really realized why I kind of was the way I was. I was a terrible teenager and acted out and was just really mean to my mother. And I don't think I ever really thought about why. Right. And so going through this has really brought a lot of things to surface, and realizing the resentment I had toward my parents because of the situation I was in. And it's not something that I, now I'm like, I'm going to hold on to this. And,
Right.
No, I have a wonderful relationship with my mother. We're so beyond that. It's nothing that I feel needs to be addressed, but it's, like I said, it's kind of been a realization of, that makes sense. That's why I was so defiant and acting out. And, there was a lot of resentment there. And so it's been eye-opening for me. And I think in sharing that with my kids, it's really helped them through a lot of things too, and understand, and probably given me some grace and maybe some resentment they had against me growing up. I know my oldest son, he flat out said that, going to therapy, he realized that he did resent me, and there were no issues. It's not like, but he just wanted me to know.
Right.
I think this is, again, why I acted out the way I did.
Right.
Or there was, kind of a barrier between our relation, in our relationship. And, he grew up a lot differently. I had him very young. He didn't get to have a lot of the benefits that,
the younger siblings had.
Yeah. And so, and I said, you know what? That makes total sense.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you telling me. And I really believe that that's true. And I don't blame you, So I'm really glad that I've been open with them about it. But as we talked about doing this topic, I thought, it's probably really good to share that with other people too, because like I said, it's not something I expected to experience in my midlife.
Right.
And it very likely could have resurfaced even if I didn't recently go through trauma.
Right.
Who knows?
Right.
But here we are.
Right.
And it's been really helpful, the therapy, and it's really given me some perspective on a lot of things that I hadn't really thought about before. And I think it's really important. Like I said, it was a goal for me to raise my children differently and to be strong and be a survivor. And I think breaking that chain of ancestral trauma,
I was going to say
is
that,
so important, because a lot of times it's this vicious cycle that goes down from generation to generation. And I take comfort in knowing that I feel like I broke it. I broke it, and my kids aren't going to have to, obviously they're going to have their own sets of issues and trauma and whatever, but I broke the way that I dealt with it too.
Right.
And I'm learning to deal with it in a healthier way, and sharing that with them so that they can kind of, get some guidance there.
And that's exactly what I was thinking when you were saying that, is how you're showing them and how you're coping, and all of those tools and things that you use, they're going to be able to use, and hopefully not, with similar situations, but with any kind of trauma, because unfortunately it's not possible to go through life without trauma.
Right.
And it could come in various, different
forms.
Yeah. Right. But it's how do you, cope with that and move on and move forward from that, and breaking the cycle.
Yes.
That's really important.
It's huge. Yeah. I think that, my kids, their father wasn't very active in their lives. He was in and out when they were younger, and pretty much now nobody talks to anybody. The kids don't talk to him. He doesn't talk to them. It's really sad, but I know that's a huge issue they're dealing with. And that's been really hard on me too, because, I harbored a lot of guilt around that. Because, I did. To me, it was like, I want to have the picture perfect family. I didn't have that, and that's what I want.
Right.
And I've been able to work through that and get past that. And I do feel like I have a picture perfect family. I mean, we all have our issues.
Right.
But to me, I'm really happy and proud of
the young adults that they are.
That they are. Absolutely.
Yeah. And for me, I find too, having been a single mother of three, we're the same, and that their father wasn't involved in their life. And I had the misbelief, which beliefs are really important. We can talk about that in a little bit. But my belief was that they didn't need a father in their life because they had a very nurturing, loving, healthy, routine environment.
Right.
So, but I'm now finding, not only through them, but through my recent experience with starting to see a therapist, now 2 weeks in, very new at this.
Congratulations.
But I find it that I am guarded and somewhat offended, because she automatically brought up like the trauma that my children must have went through without having a father. And I'm thinking, no, like, how could there be trauma? To me, trauma would have been to stay with the person.
Right.
In
that environment,
that environment. So, so for me, it's kind of the same, but yet very different paths getting there. But yeah, knowing now that my children do have, some issues because of their father's absence in their lives. But now he's present in their lives.
That's so great.
But they're not close with them.
Yeah.
Right? Because now they're old enough to know and see and feel. And, they have a relationship, but it's very distant. And they think, well, anyways. But yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's great that he's in their lives now. And, when that happens as an adult, I've never been in this situation, but I would kind of think, well, I'll take what I can get, you know?
Right.
Unless it's toxic, which is the situation with, my kids. It's they know it's toxic. They don't need that in their lives. And they've decided not to let it in. So, and I just always felt really bad that they didn't have a father, because I had one, but it was obviously not a great one.
Right.
And so to me, it was like, why can't he just be there? That's all he has to do is be there, but like I said, I held a lot of guilt around that. And yeah, it's kind of crazy now how, going to therapy, the perspective that you're given.
Yeah.
And you just kind of have to give yourself some grace.
You do. You do. Definitely. Definitely. But for those that aren't or haven't yet, reached out for therapy, which you were a great influence on me to be able to reach out, because, like what you were dealing with, it's not only that you're going through one thing, it's that you're going through so many things at the same time. And it's not that you don't have a wonderful family of support and friends who will support you, but sometimes I think you just need that person that is far removed,
outside of your circle,
that can just tell you how it is. And my hope has always been to find the tools that I need for change, right?
And I think unbiased perspective is really nice to have too.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get, advice from friends and family, but they're all, obviously it's going to be a little biased because they love you and support you, and they're not, my therapist has been really great at making me think about how things make me feel, because I can talk about all this trauma I've been through. And that was one of the first things she said to me when I was talking to her about my childhood. She's like, I'm sorry, but you're sitting here and just telling me all this information so frankly.
Right.
And I'm going, oh my gosh, she's like, wow, this girl, and you're just sitting there like it's nothing, and it's not nothing.
Right.
How do you feel about this? Have you really thought? And she calls me out on that, on a lot of stuff that I bring up and that we talk about. And I never really did that before, I guess. So it's really nice, like I said, to have that unbiased perspective and someone to hold you accountable.
Yes.
Because your loved ones are not always going to do that. They're just going to be sensitive to what they're, and give you their love and support. But, you need to be held accountable.
Yeah.
Also.
And one word that comes to mind to me when I think about you, and especially now talking about this, not that we hadn't talked about it before, but, is strength. Right. So if I I admire you, and I see strength in you, which, is probably because it's parallel to how I feel that I want to be, as a strong person. And I tend to bury things and not talk about things. And it's fine. I feel like that works for me, and I'm fine with it. But then what am I exuding to, my children and stuff? And not everybody deals with things the same way. And so I think that's what's really important too. So, and especially if you're someone that's going through any kind of trauma. But I feel like, isn't that just life? Like, when it rains, it pours.
I know.
Right? Like, you have these old sayings, and I think that they're around for a reason, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, nobody died from a broken heart. Well, if you've ever had a broken heart, you thought you were dying.
You did, yeah.
So, but it's all of these things, and they must be said for a reason.
Right.
But yeah, trauma is so difficult to understand. And, and identify for yourself, and maybe it's someone that you love that's going through this.
Yeah. I think that, I remember my mom had come to visit after my mother-in-law passed away, and I was, kind of doing my thing and making sure everyone was okay and keeping the house together and trying to be there for my fiance and her family and my kids. To them it was like grandmother they lost. And I remember my mom saying at one point, Ashley, you don't always have to be the strong one.
Yeah.
Because she saw it. She could see,
Right.
And I really appreciate that she said that, because I know I didn't really think about it. And so it's kind of made me go, I need to share that with my kids, and, in whatever form. It's okay to not be strong sometimes.
Right.
It's okay to be vulnerable and talk about what's really bothering you. And, when you're having those tough times, and, it's important to, because again, you bury it. Healthy, you bury it and you bury it, and it's going to resurface.
Right, it's going to resurface. It's going to resurface like a volcano.
Yes,
it's been my experience, but but I think acknowledging and understanding is very important.
Absolutely.
And if necessary, seek support. I think that I feel comfortable now with the. There's not a lot of stigmas around,
right?
Seeking help and
mental health or
therapists
issues.
Or psychiatrists and stuff. But it's also important to know your family history,
Absolutely.
And those stories. And I think the beliefs are really important, right? I think a person's belief, and so one of the most powerful tools that I have come across in my short period of time of therapy and seeking relief is about beliefs, and how interestingly beliefs can affect all areas behavior of your life, your behavior, your emotional health, your well-being. And just a quick story on beliefs is a story about a mother cooking a ham for dinner, and she cuts off both ends and puts it in the pan and goes to, baste it and put it in the oven. And the daughter is there saying, Mom, why do you cut both ends off of the ham when you cook it? And the mom's like, well, it's just how we've always done it. Ask your grandmother. So the little girl goes and asks her grandmother, hey, Grandma, how come, when you cook a ham, you cut both ends off of it and put it in the oven? And then the grandmother defers to the great-grandmother, saying that it's the way it's always done it. And so then, luckily in this particular, scenario, the great-grandmother is alive. So the great-granddaughter goes to the great-grandmother and says, why do you cut both ends off of the ham before you cook it? And the great-grandmother says, so it'll fit in the pan. Right? So there's no, other, deep meaning or benefit for having it cut off. But anyways, it was just about beliefs. So, the grandmother and the mother both believed that,
that's how we do it.
That's how we do it. And, sometimes you just don't question things because that's how you do it. That's how, it's always been done. And, and perhaps even when you're going through a trauma or dealing with, ancestral things that you're like, well, that's just how it is. And that's what it is.
Yeah, I think really learning what works for you as an individual is really important. And really where it starts is recognizing trauma.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was talking so frankly, with my therapist, and I guess not. I mean, I knew I didn't have a normal childhood, but I never really thought of it as traumatic.
Because you're a thriving, beautiful adult.
Well, and I just never really, I guess I just really didn't try to revisit a lot of that, the things that happened and how scary they were.
Right.
Because I didn't like that feeling, because I still felt that when I thought about it, so I just didn't.
Right. That's like me. I just very, very, very don't talk about it.
Yeah, but to me it wasn't like, oh, it was so traumatic, and I still don't, I'm not saying I'm a victim, I'm not, I mean, I guess I am. I'm a victim.
You are, yeah.
Of trauma. But
do you want to be the victim or the hero? So I think you and I, we're like victim or hero. Well, we choose hero.
We choose hero
every time. So we don't like to think of ourselves as being a victim. Yeah.
Right. But it's affected the way I deal with trauma now in my life, which isn't working for me anymore. And recognizing that what I'm actually experiencing is traumatic, and what I did experience was traumatic, and really recognizing that the way I tried to deal with it then might have worked at that time, but it doesn't anymore.
Right.
And
it's still with you.
Absolutely. So, recognize what is traumatic in your life, and it doesn't have to be big, like Tracy said. It can be it could be losing a pet. It could be
a breakup.
A breakup. Someone, your mom yelled at you about something, and it really hurt your feelings at that time, and it's just stuck with you your whole life. I mean,
or being bullied as a child.
Yes.
They didn't have as much, spotlight on that when we were growing up that they do today. But I think a lot of that, maybe insecurities or perhaps even traumas because of hazing and things like that had happened. And beliefs.
Sometimes when you're talked down to so much or treated so horribly, you go through life believing a lot of the stuff that you heard.
Right.
And that's trauma. That's traumatic. And you have to recognize that and do what works for you to face it and heal and move past it, get through that. And that's not going to be the same thing for everybody.
Unfortunately,
therapy doesn't always
there's
work
not
for everybody.
A one-stop shop for healing that. And, and maybe some people, depending upon their trauma, never 100% heal with it. But I think coping with it, and being able to continue to thrive and be happy,
right.
Is something that you can set a goal towards.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
At the very least.
Yeah, I think that just really reflecting and facing it, learning what works for you, and then, and even where those experiences took you in your life. Because like I said, I've had some real revelations about, my teenage years into my early adulthood and the way I was, behaving and the decisions I made and all of that, my perspective on life, my relationships with partners, a lot of that I think was affected by those experiences and how I dealt with them and the beliefs that I had.
Yeah.
So it's been really, really nice to kind of work through that. And I think this happens a lot in talking to people. It happens a lot of the time in midlife because, like I said, we do a lot of reflecting. Right. We do a lot of,
You have the hormones and different emotions and, maybe even some fears of aging or what have you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important, to, in the healing of generational trauma, is finding the root source of the trauma.
Yes, absolutely.
And whether that be in reflection or through, therapy, I think, finding the source of the trauma. And maybe, just maybe, we're not going to go down this road, but we're going to say it out loud. Maybe that's why so many women now are coming forth with this Me Too movement.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think now they're going into their midlife years, but that trauma, they are not able to, transcend fully into, this, phase of their life because they're dealing with this trauma that they never knew they had. Maybe they suppressed it or maybe something else.
And that was, I think
there's like an epidemic of this Me Too. It's like, come on.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. And I think a lot of that too is society and how you're viewed when you're a victim like that.
Right.
And, I think it's gone on forever since time existed.
Right.
But it's always, it's been this thing where it's hush hush. We don't talk about it. We don't, and again, it's that cycle.
Right.
And there, finally people are saying, no.
Right.
We're breaking this cycle.
Right.
This is not okay.
Exactly. Yeah. In trauma, it comes in all different, fashions, right? It's not just, one specific thing, and it's different for everybody. But for me, I was like thinking to myself, why are all these women coming out all of a sudden? Like, one woman does it, now it's this whole movement,
right?
And it's all you hear about. But now I feel, diving in a little bit deeper, is that I'm understanding now why they're just now coming forth,
right?
And had been quiet for years, and it's not opportunistic. It's just because they're, and maybe because of the movement, it creates strength in them to say, me too, and no more.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that is something that, a lot of them harbored for years and decades even. And it's not going to go away. You can harbor it all you want, but it's going to eat you.
Right.
It's going to, And no, I think those women are very strong, and I admire.
They are. Yeah.
I admire their strength.
But I feel like it's just now becoming trauma in their midlife because of the other emotions, the reflections and things that they have to look back on. But for you, allowing yourself to grieve and process your emotions is something that to me is top of mind for you and perhaps other people. And again, grief is different for everyone and, different by what you're grieving for, whether it's a loss of a life or, being violated or, any of those types of things.
Yeah.
But
and just, for me, I grieve that little girl that grew up in that environment and the expectations that were put on her.
Yeah.
And I never did that before. Now I look back to young Ashley and my heart breaks for her. She didn't realize,
right.
She knew no different.
Right.
And again, at that time, I wasn't thinking about how I felt about things that were being asked of me or done to me or anything like that. I didn't think about it because I wasn't really allowed to, and I couldn't. I had to just move forward. I had to just function. Everything had to be okay. And, I look back and I feel bad for her. And it's been really eye-opening for me and helped me kind of not harbor it anymore.
Right.
I can look back and think, oh, that's really shitty. Like, I feel so bad for my young self.
Right.
That is so unfair. And, should I have spoken up? Maybe, but I knew what the consequence was.
Right.
So again,
but now the
it was
fact
a violent
that you
consequence.
are standing up to break the cycle,
absolutely,
and are being vocal and communicating with your family, not only your mother, your mom, but your children as well.
Right.
To just break that cycle. Like, okay, this is fine. It all happened. I survived.
And even,
but it stops here.
Yeah.
Right?
Even cousins and uncles from that side of the family, I've been in conversations with, because we all went through it, and we know now that our fathers grew up in a similar environment, and our grandfathers probably did too. It's very likely,
right?
And as cousins, we didn't know that we were both living in similar situations.
Right.
We had no idea.
Right.
It wasn't something you talked about.
You didn't talk about it.
I had friends that had no idea what was going on in my home.
Right.
And yeah, so even talking to extended family has been, very helpful, and just acknowledging, I think for them too, just both acknowledging what our family is like and how fucked up it is.
Right. But but also that sense of community.
Yes.
Right. And it's so amazing that you're able to, discuss these things to break the cycle, within the, extended family.
Absolutely.
Now, with the communication and the community of people all talking about it, working towards the same goals.
Yeah, like I said, that's part of why I felt it was so important to touch on this, because I felt that way about my cousins and my family. I thought, you know what? It's very likely that they're dealing with some of the things I'm dealing with right now too, and I just want them to know I'm thinking about them. They don't have to share anything with me. But the door opened.
Right.
I opened the door, and the floodgates, it just everything.
Well, they would have to.
And I think
it's
been very, very therapeutic for all of us, and really created a stronger bond.
Right.
Right. So.
Wow. And I just can just say wow, because it's so much. And these types of situations make me think, oh, like, oh, you think you're having a bad day until you talk to a friend or hear somebody
right.
like they're having a really bad day. And it's like, oh, but I think, again, when we're going back to trauma, it can be in so many different forms. It can even be, maybe you don't have ancestral trauma. Maybe it's something, that it's your first generation. Like it could be a breakup.
It could be your parents getting divorced.
Yeah, your parents
younger,
getting divorced, or you getting divorced, and all that sense of loss and sense of disbelief, etc. Because beliefs are convictions or acceptance that something is true or exists. But it's so funny that everybody sees things in their own mind, right? You don't see with your eyes, you see with your mind. And remember, we did the F paragraph.
In the paragraph.
And I just thought that again blew my mind, trying to learn more tools about, coping and dealing with things and starting with your own beliefs. And there was a paragraph that I mentioned before and is on our social media account at Let's Talk Midlife Crisis on Instagram. But you can find the paragraph there. And then the answer is on our website, letstalkmidlifecrisis.com. But it was a paragraph and it had F's in there. And you were to count how many F's there were. And, and then there was like a multiple answer, multiple choice,
multiple
right?
Choice, yeah.
So you can pick, A, B, C, D, and it was amazing to me because I was so confident.
Oh, I was too. Several of us.
Everyone that I've done that,
yes.
That I've shared that with has not gotten it right the first time, But I personally felt like I was so confident. Like I looked at it and then I looked at it again and thoroughly looked at it, and I was so confident, and yet I was completely mistaken. Yeah, completely mistaken. So
yeah, go check it out. It's interesting.
It is interesting, and and that's what your core is, right? Is it all stems back to your core and what your beliefs are,
right?
And are they truths? And oftentimes they're not really truths. So I think it's important for you to, identify your beliefs and then,
and your truth.
And your truths and explore them and see, how close they are to being real. Well, I think that wraps it up for today. Thank you so much, Ash, for sharing so much. And
thank you.
I'm sure it's going to help so many people out there that are going through trauma and trying to break that cycle. Let us know. How you're able to overcome ancestral trauma. Again, reach out to our social channels or our website. And that just about wraps it up for today. Thank you for joining us on Let's Talk Midlife Crisis. Embrace the change.
Join the conversation on our website at letstalkmidlifecrisis.com or our Facebook or Instagram and YouTube channels. We'd love to hear from you guys.